Alright, let's say we want to determine the inverse function of f of x is equal to negative 2x squared minus 8x plus 13. Okay, this one isn't so clear-cut because we can notice that this function here is not factorable. Okay, so it's going to be very hard for us to isolate for x in this scenario, right? So recall that when we are finding the inverse function, one of the steps is to isolate for x. Alright, the first step here, I want to convert f of x is equal to y, right? So y here is equal to negative 2x squared minus 8x plus 13. But we can't really do much with this because this is not factorable. And you can tell it's not factorable because a here is negative 2, b here is negative 8, c here is 13, and ac here is negative 13 times negative 2, negative 26. Okay, so two numbers that multiply negative 26 to add up to negative 8 is not possible. Okay, so whenever we can't factor a quadratic trinomial, right, and this is a quadratic trinomial because it looks like ax squared plus bx plus c, whenever we can't factor a quadratic trinomial, what we need to do here is we need to partially factor it or complete the square. So what I'm going to do is partially factor this. Okay, so I'm going to do the partial factoring out here, right, and I'm just going to use a different color because it's kind of a little separate from finding the inverse function, but eventually we're going to have to be using this partially factored form of this function to find the inverse. Okay, so when you're partially factoring it, the rule here, when you're completing the square, if you're completing the square, the rule here is we want to add 1/2 b squared when a is equal to 1. Okay, so in this case I'm going to factor out negative 2, so you get x squared plus 4x. And I don't only factor out the two terms, the a and b term, and keep the positive 13 on the outside because it's not divisible by negative 2. And what I'm going to do here is you can notice here that a here inside is 1, b here is 4, 1/2 b here is 2, and 1/2 b squared is equal to 4. Okay, so we want to add the 1/2 b squared term on the inside. We get negative 2 on the outside, x squared plus 4x plus 4, but I can't just add 4 to an expression, right, or an equation because it will change the value of the expression or equation, so I'm going to subtract 4 to offset what I just did. And you can notice that these three terms here form a perfect square trinomial, which you can factor as x plus 1/2 b squared. That's one of the reasons why I wrote down the 1/2 b term here, right? This is why I wrote it out, because of the fact that it helps us to factor it. So if we do factor this, we get negative 2. All of this becomes x plus the 1/2 b term is 2, x plus 2 squared minus 4 plus 13. And then we want to expand this guy out. Okay, so we get negative 2 x plus 2 squared plus 8 plus 13. You get negative 2 x plus 2 squared plus 21. Okay, so this is what the function will look like now. Right, so now we have y is equal to negative 2 x plus 2 squared plus 21. So this is the function that I'm going to be working with. Once I have this partially factored form of the function, now I'm going to try to do my second step here, which is isolate for x. Okay, so if I'm isolating for x, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to move the 21 to the other side, right? So we get y minus 21, right? And this is equal to negative 2x plus 2 squared. The next step I'm going to do here is I'm going to get rid of the negative 2, so I'm going to divide this by negative 2. Whatever I do on one side of the equation, I'm going to do to the other side. So we're going to divide this side by negative 2 as well. And now you have x plus 2 squared is equal to y minus 21 over negative 2. Well, I want to get rid of the square, so I'm going to do the square root. I'm going to do the same thing to this side. So the square and the square root cancel out, and we basically get x plus 2 is equal to the square root of y minus 21 over negative 2. Okay? And all we have to do to isolate x now is I'm going to move the to the other side, so you get x is equal to the square root of y minus 21 over 2 minus 2. Okay? The third step here is you want to swap x as f inverse of x and y as x. Okay, so x becomes f inverse of x is equal to the square root of y is x minus 21 over 2. Sorry, there should be a negative 2 here. Minus 2. Okay, and this is basically your inverse function.